When 9-year-old Rosalind stood in the freezing rain outside Michael Jordan's car, soaking wet and shivering, she had no idea that begging him for a job would change both their lives forever. But what Michael told her 2 years later about why he stopped that night would reveal a secret he had kept hidden for decades. The rain hammered against the cracked pavement outside the United Center in Chicago as 9-year-old Rosalind Martinez pressed her small hands against the cold metal barrier, her threadbare jacket doing little to protect her from the October chill. Her dark eyes, ringed with exhaustion that no child should know, scanned the parking lot with desperate intensity as expensive cars began pulling away from the arena, their headlights cutting through the downpour like searchlights. She had been standing there for 3 hours, her sneakers with the hole in the left toe completely soaked through, her thin frame shivering uncontrollably, but she refused to leave because tonight might be her only chance to save her mother's life. Inside her pocket, folded and refolded so many times the creases had begun to tear, was a piece of notebook paper on which she had written in her careful, looping handwriting exactly what she would say if she could just get close enough to speak. The words had been practiced in front of the bathroom mirror at home, whispered to herself on the bus ride downtown, repeated like a prayer as she stood in the rain. Because Rosalind knew that she would only get one shot at this, and she could not afford to mess it up. Her mother, Elena, was at home right now, lying in their narrow bed in their one-bedroom apartment on the south side. Her skin pale as paper, her breathing shallow and labored, and the medical bills that arrived in the mail each week with their angry red letters might as well have been written in a foreign language for all the hope they offered. The black SUV appeared suddenly, its tinted windows reflecting the stadium lights, and Rosalind felt her heart slam against her ribs because she had seen this vehicle before on television, had watched it pull up to arenas across the country, and she knew with absolute certainty who was inside. Her legs, numb from standing in the cold, suddenly came alive with adrenaline as she ducked under the barrier, ignoring the shout from the security guard posted near the entrance. Her small body moved with surprising speed as she raced across the wet asphalt, her arms waving frantically in the air. And she was screaming words that came from somewhere deep inside her chest, words that carried the weight of every sleepless night she had spent listening to her mother cough. Every morning she had prepared her own breakfast because Elena was too weak to get out of bed. Every moment of terror she felt when she imagined what would happen if her mother did not get better. The SUV's brake lights flared red, and the vehicle came to a stop. And for a moment that seemed suspended outside of time itself, Rosalind stood frozen in the rain, her chest heaving, her hair plastered to her face, as the back door opened and a figure emerged that seemed impossibly tall, impossibly real, impossibly there. Michael Jordan looked down at the small, soaking wet child standing before him, his expression unreadable behind dark sunglasses, despite the fact that night had already fallen, and Rosalind found herself unable to speak, all those carefully practiced words dissolving on her tongue like sugar in water. His security team had already started moving toward her, their faces stern and professional, but Jordan raised one hand in a gesture that stopped them in their tracks, and then he was crouching down, bringing himself closer to her level, and asking in a voice she had only ever heard through television speakers what she was doing out here alone in the rain. The words came tumbling out of Rosalind in a torrent that matched the downpour around them, her small voice cracking with emotion as she told him about her mother, about the lupus that was destroying Elena's kidneys, about the job Elena had lost when she became too sick to work, about the medical bills that kept piling up because their insurance had lapsed, about the doctors who said that without proper treatment and medication, her mother might not live to see another year. She told him that she did not want money, that she was not asking for a handout, but that she was asking for a job, any job, something she could do to earn enough to help pay for her mother's medicine, to keep food in their refrigerator, to make sure they did not lose their apartment. She was good at cleaning, she said, and she could organize things, and she was very responsible for her age. And she would work harder than anyone he had ever met because her mother was the only family she had in the world, and she could not, would not let her die. Michael Jordan listened to every word without interrupting, his face still difficult to read. And when Rosalind finally ran out of breath and stood there shaking in the rain, her eyes pleading up at him, he did not speak immediately. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours, and Rosalind felt her hope beginning to crack like ice under pressure, because she had just poured out her entire heart to a stranger, had gambled everything on this one desperate moment. And what if he simply got back in his car and drove away? What if he thought she was just another person trying to get something from him? What if he did not believe her or did not care? Then Jordan removed his sunglasses and Rosalind saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch, a flicker of recognition or memory or pain. And he reached out and placed one large hand on her small shoulder and told her to get in the car because they needed to talk somewhere dry. The interior of the SUV was warm and smelled like leather and expensive cologne, and Rosalind sat on the edge of the seat with her hands folded in her lap, trying not to drip too much water onto the immaculate floor mats, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone in the vehicle could hear it. Jordan sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, and he asked her questions in a gentle but direct manner that demanded honest answers. He asked for her name, for her address, for her mother's name and the name of the hospital where she received treatment, for details about her mother's condition and their living situation. And Rosalind answered every question with the kind of unflinching honesty that only comes from someone who has nothing left to lose. She did not embellish or exaggerate because the truth was already more than enough. And she could see in Jordan's face that he understood this, that he was taking her seriously in a way that few adults ever had. When the SUV pulled up in front of the crumbling apartment building where Rosalind lived, Jordan asked if he could meet her mother, and Rosalind felt a spike of panic because the apartment was messy and small, and the heat did not work properly, and there was hardly any food in the cabinets. But she nodded because refusing seemed impossible. She led Jordan and one member of his security team up 3 flights of stairs, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, the smell of boiled cabbage and mildew hanging in the air. And when she unlocked the door to apartment 3C and stepped inside, she found her mother exactly where she had left her hours earlier. Elena Martinez was lying in bed with her eyes closed, her breathing raspy and uneven, a thin blanket pulled up to her chin, and when she heard footsteps, she opened her eyes and looked toward the door with confusion that quickly shifted to alarm when she saw not only her daughter but 2 strange men standing in her home. Rosalind rushed to her mother's side and took Elena's hand, which felt hot and dry like paper about to catch fire. And she explained in rapid Spanish what had happened, how she had gone to the stadium, how she had stopped Michael Jordan's car, how she had asked for a job. And Elena's eyes grew wide with horror and embarrassment as she struggled to sit up, apologizing profusely in heavily accented English for her daughter's behavior, insisting that Rosalind should never have bothered such an important man, begging him to forgive the intrusion. But Jordan stepped forward and pulled up the single chair in the room and sat down beside the bed. And he spoke to Elena in a calm, steady voice, telling her that Rosalind had not bothered him at all, that in fact her daughter was one of the bravest people he had ever met, and that he wanted to help if Elena would allow it. The conversation that followed was unlike anything Rosalind had ever witnessed. 2 adults speaking to each other with a kind of raw vulnerability that made her feel like she was seeing something she was not supposed to see. Elena cried, her thin body shaking with sobs as she admitted how scared she was, how guilty she felt that her daughter had to witness her deterioration, how ashamed she was that she could not provide the kind of life she had dreamed of giving Rosalind when she held her as a newborn baby. Jordan listened without judgment, and then he shared something that Rosalind would remember for the rest of her life. He told them about his own father, James Jordan, who had been murdered years earlier, and how the loss had taught him that time with the people we love is the most precious thing in the world, more valuable than all the championships and endorsements and fame combined. He told Elena that her daughter deserved to have her mother in her life and that he was going to make sure that happened. What Rosalind did not know, what she could not have known as she sat there holding her mother's hand and listening to Michael Jordan promise to help them, was that there was a reason he had stopped his car that night, a reason he had listened to her desperate plea, a reason he seemed to understand the depth of her fear in a way that went beyond simple empathy. Jordan had made that same promise to other people before, had tried to help in ways both public and private, but there was something about the small girl standing in the rain that had triggered a memory he had tried to bury for years, something about her desperation that resonated with a piece of his own past that he rarely discussed with anyone. The full truth of that connection would not become clear until much later, until after everything that happened in the weeks and months that followed. And by then, Rosalind's entire life would have changed in ways she could never have imagined. The next morning, Rosalind woke up on the couch where she had fallen asleep the night before, her body aching from the dampness of her rain-soaked clothes. And for a moment, she thought the entire encounter with Michael Jordan had been a dream, one of those vivid nighttime fantasies that feel so real until consciousness returns. But then there was a knock at the door, and when she opened it, she found a woman in a professional suit holding a clipboard, introducing herself as Dr. Patricia Chen, a specialist in autoimmune diseases who had been asked to consult on Elena's case. Behind her stood a man with kind eyes who explained that he was a social worker named David Reeves, and he was there to help the Martinez family navigate the medical system and apply for various assistance programs that could help cover the cost of Elena's treatment. Rosalind stood in the doorway in her wrinkled clothes from the day before, her mind struggling to process what was happening, until her mother called weakly from the bedroom, asking who was at the door. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of doctor's appointments and medical tests, social workers and insurance forms, new medications and treatment plans that actually seemed to take Elena's pain seriously rather than simply managing it. Dr. Chen arranged for Elena to be seen at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, one of the best medical facilities in Chicago, where a team of specialists began coordinating her care with an attention to detail that would have been impossible to afford without intervention. The bills that had once seemed so insurmountable were being handled by a foundation whose name Rosalind did not recognize. And when she asked about it, the social workers would simply say that certain organizations existed to help families in medical crisis and leave it at that. Rosalind was not stupid, though, and she knew that this kind of comprehensive help did not just materialize out of nowhere for a poor Hispanic family living on the South Side, knew that somewhere behind the scenes, Michael Jordan was keeping the promise he had made in their tiny apartment. But Jordan himself seemed to have disappeared from their lives as suddenly as he had entered it. And Rosalind found herself wondering if she would ever see him again, if that one night in the rain would be the only time she ever spoke to the man who had saved her mother's life. She tried to write him thank you letters, laboring over each word with the intensity of someone trying to capture lightning in a bottle, but she had no address to send them to, no way to reach someone who existed in a world so far removed from her own that it might as well have been another planet. She asked the social workers if they could pass along her gratitude, but they would only smile and say that the best way to show thanks was to focus on school and take care of her mother. So Rosalind threw herself into both with a determination that impressed her teachers and worried her mother in equal measure. Elena's health began to improve slowly, incrementally, in ways that were easy to miss from day to day, but dramatic when viewed over weeks and months. The color returned to her cheeks, the painful swelling in her joints decreased, the crushing fatigue that had kept her bedridden began to lift like fog burning off in sunlight. She started being able to get out of bed without assistance, to prepare simple meals, to walk to the corner store without needing to stop and rest every few minutes. Dr. Chen explained that the new treatment protocol was targeting the underlying autoimmune response more effectively than the generic medications Elena had been taking before, that they had caught the kidney damage before it became irreversible, that with continued treatment and monitoring, there was every reason to hope for a stable, functional future. Elena cried when she heard this news, but these were different tears than the ones Rosalind had grown accustomed to seeing. Tears of relief and gratitude rather than despair and pain. Christmas came and went, and for the first time in years, the Martinez apartment felt warm with something other than just the inadequate heating system. Elena was strong enough to cook a proper meal, filling their small kitchen with the smells of the traditional food she had learned from her own mother, and Rosalind sat at their tiny table and ate until her stomach hurt, savoring every bite, not because the food was extraordinary, but because her mother had made it, because her mother was there and alive and getting better. They did not have money for presents, but they had each other, and after everything they had been through, that seemed like more than enough. Rosalind had almost convinced herself that the chapter of their lives involving Michael Jordan was closed, that he had been a guardian angel who had swooped in during their darkest moment and then moved on to whatever important things famous people did with their time. Then in January, 3 months after that rainy night outside the United Center, Rosalind came home from school to find her mother sitting at the table with a strange expression on her face, holding an envelope made of heavy cream-colored paper that looked nothing like the medical bills and past due notices they usually received. Elena's hands were shaking slightly as she held it out to Rosalind. And when Rosalind opened it, she found a letter written on official stationery from the Jordan brand offices. The letter was addressed to both of them, and it explained that Michael Jordan had not forgotten about them, that he had been following Elena's medical progress through her doctors, and that he had a proposition he wanted to discuss with them in person. The letter included a phone number and asked them to call to arrange a meeting at a time that was convenient for them, and Rosalind read it 3 times to make sure she was not misunderstanding, her heart racing faster with each pass. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning at a restaurant downtown, the kind of place where Rosalind had never eaten before, where the menus did not have prices listed and the waiters wore crisp white shirts and moved with practiced efficiency. Jordan was already there when they arrived, sitting in a private section away from other diners, and he stood when he saw them, greeting Elena with a gentle handshake and Rosalind with a warm smile that made her feel like he actually remembered her, like she was not just some random charity case he had helped and forgotten. They sat down and ordered food that Rosalind was too nervous to eat, and then Jordan explained why he had asked them to come. He told them that over the past few months he had been thinking a lot about courage and what it meant, about the different forms bravery could take, and that Rosalind's willingness to approach a stranger in the rain and advocate for her mother had impressed him more than almost anything he had encountered in his professional life. He said that true courage was not about being fearless, but about being so afraid you could barely breathe and doing what needed to be done anyway. And that quality was something that could not be taught or faked, that you either had it or you did not, and Rosalind clearly had it in abundance. He said that he had started thinking about ways to help other families like the Martinez family, people who found themselves in impossible situations through no fault of their own, and he wanted to create something that could make a real difference. But he needed help, and specifically he needed Rosalind's help. Rosalind stared at him with confusion, because what could a 9-year-old girl possibly do to help one of the most successful athletes in history? But Jordan leaned forward with that intense focus she had seen in highlight reels of him playing basketball, and he explained his vision. He wanted to create a foundation that would identify families dealing with medical crises, particularly families with children who were trying to be brave in impossible circumstances, and he wanted those families to be able to connect with other families who had been through similar experiences. He wanted to create a support network, a community, a place where people did not have to feel alone in their struggles, and he wanted Rosalind to be part of telling that story, to share her experience, to be a voice for other kids who were scared and desperate and did not know where to turn. He was not offering her a job in the traditional sense because she was too young to work legally, but he was offering her the chance to make a difference, to turn her own pain into something that could help others, and he wanted to know if she was interested. Rosalind looked at her mother, who had tears streaming down her face, and then back at Jordan, and she asked in a small voice if this meant she would get to help other kids like her. Kids who were watching their parents suffer and did not know what to do about it. And Jordan nodded and said yes, that was exactly what it meant. She asked if her mother could be involved too, once she was feeling stronger, and Jordan said that was exactly what he hoped would happen, that survivors like Elena were the most powerful advocates because they understood the journey from the inside. Rosalind felt something shifting inside her chest, something that felt like the opposite of the crushing weight she had carried for so long, and she realized that this was what hope felt like. Real hope, the kind that was built on solid ground rather than desperate wishes, and she told Jordan yes, she wanted to help. She wanted to be part of this. She wanted to make sure that what happened to her family never happened to anyone else if she could prevent it. The foundation launched in the spring with a small office and a dedicated staff, and Rosalind became its youngest ambassador, sharing her story at fundraising events and in promotional materials, speaking with other children who were going through similar experiences with sick parents or siblings. It was hard at first, having to talk about the worst period of her life over and over again. reliving those feelings of helplessness and fear. But she found that each time she told her story, it became a little easier. And more importantly, she saw how it affected other people. Kids who had been sitting with hunched shoulders and defeated expressions would look up when they heard her talk, would approach her afterward with tears in their eyes and thank her for making them feel less alone. And Rosalind understood that this was what it meant to transform pain into purpose, to take the worst thing that had ever happened to you and use it to light the way for someone else. Elena recovered enough to return to work part-time, but she also became involved with the foundation, serving as a peer counselor for other parents dealing with chronic illnesses, offering the kind of support that could only come from someone who had walked that path themselves. She and Rosalind would sometimes work together, mother and daughter united in their mission to help others, and there were moments when Elena would look at her daughter with such pride and love that Rosalind felt like she could accomplish anything. The apartment on the south side remained their home, but it felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the darkness that had pressed down on them for so long had finally lifted. They were not rich and their life was not easy, but they had each other and they had purpose and they had hope, which was more than Rosalind had dared to dream about during those desperate days before she decided to stand in the rain and wait for a miracle. Rosalind saw Jordan occasionally at foundation events, and he always made a point of speaking with her directly, asking about school and her mother's health, and whether she was doing okay with the public speaking requirements of her ambassador role. She wanted to ask him sometimes why he had stopped his car that night, why he had taken her seriously when so many other people would have dismissed her as just another person trying to get something from a celebrity. But she never quite found the courage to pose the question. There was something in the way he looked at her sometimes, though, a flicker of recognition or memory that suggested there was more to the story than he had shared. And Rosalind filed that observation away in the back of her mind, trusting that if it was important, she would find out eventually. 2 years passed, and Rosalind was 11 now, taller and more confident, but still carrying that essential quality of fierce protectiveness toward the people she loved. The foundation had grown beyond anything anyone had initially imagined, helping hundreds of families navigate medical crises, connecting people who felt isolated in their suffering with communities of support and understanding. Elena was in stable remission, her lupus controlled by medication and monitoring, and she had returned to full-time work as an administrative assistant at a community health center, using her experience to help connect other patients with resources they might not have known existed. Life had normalized in many ways, the crisis that had once defined their existence fading into something that felt more like a chapter in their story rather than the entire book. Then one evening in October, exactly 2 years after that rainy night outside the United Center, Rosalind received a call on the phone the foundation had given her for official business. The voice on the other end was familiar but unexpected, and Michael Jordan asked if she and her mother could come to his office the next day, that there was something he wanted to tell them, something he had been meaning to share for a long time but had not found the right moment. Rosalind agreed, curiosity and slight anxiety mixing in her stomach, and she told her mother about the call, watching Elena's face shift through a series of expressions before settling on cautious interest. The Jordan brand offices were sleek and modern, decorated with photographs and memorabilia from Jordan's legendary career, and Rosalind and Elena were escorted to a private conference room where Jordan was waiting, looking somehow both exactly as Rosalind remembered and slightly different, older maybe, or perhaps just more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. He asked them to sit down, and then he took a deep breath like someone preparing to dive into deep water, and he began to tell them a story that Rosalind had never heard before, a story about his childhood and a rainy day in North Carolina when he was just a boy. No older than Rosalind had been that night outside the stadium. Jordan told them about his mother, Dolores, and how when he was 9 years old, she had been in a serious car accident that left her hospitalized for weeks, how the medical bills had piled up, how his father had worked multiple jobs to try to cover the costs, how Jordan himself had been consumed with fear that his mother might die, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He told them about how he had felt helpless and small and terrified, how he had tried to find ways to earn money to help, how he had been willing to do anything if it meant his mother would survive. He told them that his mother had eventually recovered, but that the memory of that helplessness had stayed with him his entire life, shaping his work ethic and his drive to succeed and his complicated relationship with vulnerability and dependence on others. Jordan explained that when he saw Rosalind standing in the rain that night, soaking wet and desperate and brave beyond measure, it was like looking into a mirror that showed him his own past, his own fear, his own willingness to do whatever it took to save someone he loved. He said that he had not planned to stop the car, that his security team had been instructed to keep moving in situations like that. But something about the way Rosalind had been waving her arms, the desperation in her voice that carried through the rain in the car windows, had bypassed all his carefully constructed walls and reached something primal inside him. He had stopped because he saw himself in her, because he remembered what it felt like to be that scared and that determined, because he knew that if someone had helped him when he was 9 years old, it might have changed something fundamental in how he viewed the world. But there was more, Jordan continued, his voice dropping lower, and he told them something he had never shared publicly, something that only a handful of people in his life knew. When he was 11 years old, 2 years after his mother's accident, he had tried to approach a local businessman in his North Carolina town, someone who was known for being wealthy and successful, and he had asked that man for help, explained that his family was still struggling with debt from the medical bills, offered to do any kind of work in exchange for wages that could help his parents. The man had looked down at him like he was an insect, had told him that children should not be bothering adults with their problems, had literally turned his back and walked away, while Jordan stood there feeling something inside him shrivel and harden. Jordan said that moment had taught him never to be vulnerable, never to ask for help, never to let anyone see that he needed anything from them, and it had taken decades of therapy and personal work to unpack the damage that single interaction had done to his ability to trust and connect with others. When he saw Rosalind standing in the rain asking for help, Jordan said he knew he had a choice. He could be the man who had turned away from him when he was 11, or he could be the person he wished had been there for him, the person who took a scared kid seriously and offered a hand instead of rejection. He chose to be the latter, and in doing so, he felt like he was somehow reaching back through time and helping that 11-year-old version of himself, offering the kindness and understanding that had been denied to him. He said that helping Rosalind and Elena had healed something in him that he had not even fully realized was broken, and that the foundation they had built together was not really about charity or philanthropy in the traditional sense. It was about creating a world where scared children asking for help were met with compassion instead of dismissal, where vulnerability was honored instead of exploited, where no one had to feel as alone as he had felt during that terrible period of his childhood. Rosalind sat very still as Jordan finished speaking, her eyes wide and shining with tears, and she understood suddenly that she had not saved her mother by being brave that night, or rather, that was not the only thing she had done. She had also saved Michael Jordan in a way, had given him the opportunity to rewrite his own story, to be for her what no one had been for him. And in accepting his help, she had given him a gift as valuable as the one he had given her. The realization was overwhelming and humbling and beautiful, and she felt the last piece of shame she had been carrying, the small voice that occasionally whispered that she was just a charity case, that Jordan had helped her out of pity or obligation, finally dissolve into nothing. They had saved each other, she understood now, and the foundation they had built was a monument to that mutual salvation, a place where people could come together in their brokenness and their strength and their humanity and know that they were not alone. Elena reached across the table and took Jordan's hand, and then Rosalind did the same, and the three of them sat there connected in a moment of understanding that transcended words. Three people whose lives had intersected in the rain on a desperate October night, and who had chosen to transform that intersection into something lasting and meaningful. Jordan told them that he wanted them to know the full story because they deserved to understand why he had stopped that night, why their family had meant so much to him, why he thought about them often, even during the periods when they did not see each other. He said that Rosalind's courage had reminded him that vulnerability was not weakness, but the most profound kind of strength. And that lesson was something he carried with him every day, something that had changed how he approached not just his foundation work, but his relationships with his own children, his own family, his own sense of what mattered in life. Years later, when Rosalind Martinez graduated from college with a degree in social work, Michael Jordan was in the audience with her mother, and when she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she thought about that rainy night when she was 9 years old and desperate and brave enough to believe that asking for help might save her mother's life. She thought about all the families the foundation had helped, all the children who no longer had to feel alone in their fear, all the parents who had been given a second chance at life and health and time with their children. She thought about how one moment of courage, one decision to stand in the rain and wave her arms at a passing car had rippled outward in ways she could never have imagined, touching hundreds of lives and changing the trajectory of her entire existence. But most of all, she thought about what she had learned from Michael Jordan, who had shown her that strength came in many forms, that vulnerability was not something to be hidden, but something to be honored, that the people who seemed the most powerful and untouchable often carried wounds from their childhood that shaped everything they did, and that healing was possible when people chose to help each other instead of turning away. She thought about how he had seen his own scared 11-year-old self in her 9-year-old eyes, how he had chosen to be for her what no one had been for him, and how that choice had healed them both in ways that neither could have predicted. As she walked off the stage with her diploma, she caught Jordan's eye in the crowd, and he nodded at her with that same intensity she remembered from the first night they met. And she knew without words being exchanged that he was proud of her, that he saw in her not the desperate child she had been, but the strong, purposeful woman she had become, and that he understood better than almost anyone what that transformation had cost and what it meant. Rosalind Martinez had asked Michael Jordan for a job to save her sick mother, standing in the rain outside the United Center with nothing but hope and desperation driving her forward, and he had given her something far more valuable than employment. He had given her dignity and agency and the knowledge that her voice mattered, that her love for her mother was not a burden to be hidden, but a source of power to be wielded, and that in her darkest moments she had possessed the courage to reach out across the gap between her world and his, and ask for help. And in doing so, she had given him the gift of being able to say yes, to be the person who stopped instead of driving past, to heal his own childhood wounds by ensuring that another scared child did not have to face the same rejection he had experienced. They had saved each other that rainy October night, a 9-year-old girl and a basketball legend, both of them carrying more pain than the world could see, both of them brave enough to be vulnerable, both of them choosing love and compassion over fear and self-protection. And from that choice had grown something beautiful and lasting that would continue to touch lives long after they were both gone. A testament to the transformative power of meeting desperate courage with generous compassion, of seeing in another person's suffering a reflection of your own and choosing to reach out rather than turn away. If this story touched your heart, tell us where you are listening from in the comments below. Hit that like button to help us spread more stories of kindness and courage to people who need hope today. Subscribe so you never miss another inspiring story, and click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another amazing tale that will restore your faith in humanity.